Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of The Off-Grid Traveller. Today we're going to be joined by Dean and Chantel, an Aussie and French couple who just before COVID packed up their family and two young boys in tow and flew to France, where they picked up a brand new catamaran and sailed it back to Australia over the course of 2 years. Not only did they almost get stuck in crocodile-infested waters, but we talk about how it's cheaper to travel than to stay in one place, and that the opportunity for house swapping has never been bigger. And as always, we'd like to thank the sponsor of today's podcast, Dry Flush Toilets. If you haven't seen these amazing off-grid toilets, then you really need to check them out. They're the cleanest, easiest, smell-free toilet that you've ever seen, and they recently won the best new camping technology in Australia. No more dumping chemicals or maintaining a composting toilet. Go to www.dryflush.com.au to see how they work. Let's get travelling.
Welcome to the Off-Grid Traveller podcast, where we meet the people who go off-grid and into a life of adventure, challenge, and grand new horizons. Whether on land or on sea, you'll meet some fascinating characters who've chosen the road less travelled and discover their best tips, worst moments, favourite destinations, and a whole lot more.
Hi guys, welcome to the Off-Grid Traveller podcast. Today we have the wonderful Dean and Chantel, who are an Aussie and French couple who just before COVID, or 50-50 between COVID and before then, they packed their family up. Two young boys you have who flew to France, where they picked up a brand new catamaran and sailed it back to Australia over the course of a year or so. Is that right?
2 years.
2 years. Wow. So is it possible if you could kind of unpack how you decided to do that adventure and why did you decide to go from France to Australia?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, France was a good place to pick up a boat. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So the boats that we were looking at were getting built in France, so that was a good place to jump off from. And also it's close to the Mediterranean, so we wanted to do the Med. That was Chantel's family was over there, so it was a good place to start. Head over, set the boat up because we had family close by, which was a good thing. And then from there we could move into the Mediterranean and then head back to Australia. So yeah, the idea was to start somewhere.
So it was get to see some family first of all, and spend some time, because I'm guessing being in Australia and France, you only get to see them X amount of times a year, or every couple years, right? So that initial, here's the family, here's what they look like now, they've gotten taller, congratulations, now we're going off on a catamaran around the world. Love that.
Yeah, I think especially in France is actually my family, because Dean, he's from the UK, but he's been in Australia his whole life. So that was really to see my family. Dean wanted to do the adventure. So I said, well, it's a compromise. You want to do a big adventure. I want to spend a lot of time with my family, or a couple of months.
Yeah.
So let's combine the two together. And that's why France was a good start for us.
And I always wanted to cross the Atlantic. I hadn't crossed the Atlantic on a boat, so that was a big tick of something I, as a bucket list, wanted to do. That was a good start.
So because you've done sailing all your life, or when did you start sailing initially?
I as a boat builder when I was young, but then sort of was out of it for quite some time. But yeah, no, I've always been passionate about the water and sailing. So yeah, it was a good thing.
Because I was just looking on, as I was saying, I was looking on your Instagram and I saw some of your kids. They were doing the rigging, and I was just going, they clearly have been taught this by greater minds to get them to a point where how old are they at the moment?
13
and 12 now, but when we started the journey it was 8 and 10.
Wow. Like they have grown around boats their whole life, right? So let's say in 10 years time they're going to be on their own adventures, and that they're going to be absolutely fine.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. That was a big part of it as well, was to, before they went into high school, was to we sort of looked at the timeline and went, well, if we don't pull the trigger now, we might not do it. They'll get to high school and then they'll be gone, and we would have missed that opportunity to share it as a family and help them grow and see.
Yeah, it was a lot harder for me to let that control go of my little boys, getting out of their cotton wool and into the big wide world, because
Literally.
What you saw on the Instagram, doing the swing,
Cirque
obviously
du Soleil.
yes, my first few times were not as, my heart was pounding, and it took me few goes to observe them, to say, no, they're fine, they'll be fine. And then eventually it just became second nature for them. And then at that point, I wasn't even worried myself. So.
Wow. And so, because obviously you were on a journey for 2 years, what was the kind of education program for them? Because obviously they're learning what's around them, and you're teaching them everything about boats and how to survive on the open sea. Because there was a point in it where you guys had not touched land for 2 weeks. And I was just thinking, like, you've got to have some sea legs by that point, right? But how then in the daytime do you make sure that they're still learning their fundamental education?
Well, we took a really a school of life approach to their education, right. And I made sure that we had the curriculum for math and English covered, and for the rest, it was really going to be on hands learning, even currency, culture, different languages as we went to different countries. By the end of it, they're pretty savvy in being able to work out an exchange in US dollars to euros to Australian dollars to French francs in Tahiti. All this.
Wow, Tahiti still uses francs as well, then, right?
Yeah, francs, but the value is quite incredible. It's very, very. You have to spend thousands of francs to even get
an apple.
So it's very interesting. You feel like you're rich, but you're not.
No, I love that. Because I remember being in Cambodia, and the currency there, its value has gone down astronomically, and we met these French rock band who were just wandering around as you do. And at one point they got so much of it, they put it in a bath, and they were sitting in the bath with all the money. And they're like, this is worth maybe 10 apples or something like that. But it looked good, right? So
yes, absolutely. That's exactly the same in French Polynesia.
Oh, I love that.
They learned with life so many
and they met other kids along the way as well, which were also doing a journey and learning, so it was good for them to see that and interact with other kids that
socializing
right. Because so the biggest parts you took from that is that you were actually teaching them like life skills that they're actually going to use as adults more than.
Correct.
And there's nothing wrong with the education system, but there is. But you found that by going, hey, look, this is a US dollar, and this is a euro, and this is the reason why this costs this, and that's why you need to know these things. You're putting them way ahead of the curve, like way ahead of the curve. And sorry, go on.
And also what it takes to get into different countries, like just the ability to go from one country to the other. What sort of paperwork do you have to do, fill out? How do you bring the boat from one place to the next? Who do you have to speak to?
What are you allowed to bring into the country and not allowed? And it's different with every single one. And reason, and we go beyond, like, what's the reason behind it? Like, so they really get into the nitty gritty of everyday life, basically.
But you make it fun because you're on the open sea at the same time.
Absolutely. We're catching our own food, we're killing it, we're gutting it, we're eating it.
At 10 years of age, and that was pretty impressive.
Just taking out a fish, and you're just like, no, they can do it now. I don't need to. I can just do the boat and be the captain.
That's right. And they love tuna sashimi now. Before they would have one fish, but the real raw tuna, they absolutely love it. We caught so much of it.
Wow. So what was the catamaran that you purchased? What was the brand that you got?
We got a Bali 4.1,
Right.
which was Katana.
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful boat. Probably wouldn't be the one I would recommend to actually do an ocean crossing again.
Okay.
As a purpose boat, because I was going to try and use it as a business back in Australia. Decided to charter, but decided against it. So I'd probably choose the boat differently for what we were doing. But I did choose the route that we were doing to be with the prevailing winds to make it a bit more comfortable.
Oh, so because obviously you matched the boat to the route so that or vice versa, to make sure that you weren't going to be in any kind of situations which called for better equipment.
Correct.
That's
correct.
right.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, we made sure
Yep.
that we were in mostly safe. But that said, the weather can completely change in a minute, and that you never foresee that. But we made sure we took all the necessary
Precautions
to comfortable as can be.
So the catamaran that you got, what's the difference between that one and the one that you would probably choose for your next adventure, or if you were on that venture again?
He will choose one that goes faster.
Yes.
Speed.
More speed, more sail. Our catamaran didn't have that much sail, and therefore not as much wind caught it, and therefore we were not going
slower.
as fast.
And so other boats were beating us, and it's never a good thing.
It's not a good feeling, is it?
No, definitely need to go faster. So
and another thing that we would change on that boat we have is for him to go change the rigging, to go maneuver the boat, he would have to literally get outside and up stairs. And when you are in ocean crossing at night, that was my biggest fear, that you get out and literally fall in the water, even though he was tethered and he had, you never know. There are boats where you can go and maneuver the boat staying within the cabin itself. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's fine. If I had to do it again, definitely would do.
It's a great charter boat. It's not a great ocean boat.
No.
For ocean crossing,
it can be done. Obviously, we proved that. But I would change.
You learn. You
That's
always learn from. You learn from.
You learn.
Yeah, you've got to actually do the experience to understand what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So when you do it again, or when you explain it to somebody, you go, okay, I would do this instead of this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you've got to do it.
Yes, and
that's right.
It doesn't matter how much you prepare or you think you've researched, because we did a lot of research thinking we had it all down pat, everything, and we still would do few things differently, but mostly
still do it.
We still do it.
But it's the sea, right? It's the sea. Like, it doesn't matter how much you prepare, anything can happen, especially when you're in an area where you have minimal communication abilities as well, and you're getting those small packets of data to tell you the locations that you need to go. You go by what you see, and that's all you have. And it's interesting to think about that. What, now that you've done that, are the three biggest pieces of tech or items that you think are absolutely 100% needed when you're on this, or wish that you had at that time?
Yeah, no, we had Iridium Go, which was definitely the most important piece, which basically lets you know what the weather is. That you can download the weather for where you are at all times, even though it's not all correct. And you look at it and you go, well, they're definitely not out here, are they? But saying that, at least it gives you a reasonable idea of what the weather should be, and that there's no cyclones coming, no massive storms. Gives you ability to communicate with the outside world.
At the ocean, when you're deep in the ocean, when you know it's basically satellite communication.
And you need that. You have to. That's definitely one thing you need. Two, I would a good wardrobe of sails. We didn't have enough of a wardrobe, so when we were crossing
That's
the Pacific,
interesting.
we blew out a sail, and that brought us back, slowed us right down. So having an extra couple of sails would have been to me, it's a must. Other things you need, don't really.
Well, a life raft is obvious. Not that we use it, but life raft. Yeah.
Good sense of adventure.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And an ability to adapt.
I love that. Yeah, well, it's before we unpack the emotional side of it, one thing that I'd love to go in is that when you were saying about the having the sails and one of them blew out, where did you find how slow were you going at that point, and then where did you find a replacement? How did you sort that situation out, and did you buy more after you had that sail blow out?
No, we basically sail blew out halfway across the Pacific. So we were 2 weeks into the trip. Wow. We were doing about 10 knots, which was absolutely incredible and beautiful. And we went from 10 to 6. And we still had 2 weeks ahead of us. So that then calculate the time that we were not doing that extra 4 knots. And you're like, that's a lot.
It grows, yeah.
But fixing the sail was difficult because it was during COVID, so trying to get anybody to do anything. So we actually sailed without it for all the way to Fiji till we got it repaired in Fiji.
Yeah. And that's why we are great to have another one of it.
And obviously, as you go along, it's also the expense. You go to Tahiti. To fix anything in Tahiti is crazy amount of money.
Astronomical, yeah.
Astronomical, and to import into Tahiti also is an astronomical amount. So you want to be able to make sure that you've got it before you go, so that you've already has that ability just to swap it out and leave it until you get to a port that actually you can afford to do it at a reasonable cost.
In spares of everything, that the important part to manage the port is important.
That's a really good tip, guys. So have spares of almost everything which can blow out.
Well, you're not going to have everything, but you have to. We left Panama, and probably one of our biggest storms was we got into a lightning storm pretty well a day out of Panama, and we were coming to a set of islands, and Panama had just gone into COVID, which was a massive lockdown. Like basically they were locking down everything.
Wow.
And we took a lightning strike, not direct, but not far from us. I'd had everything turned off, and it took out our wind instruments, our some of our navigation, and our speed, and something else.
So basically, to find out what wind was,
what wind speed there was at the time, the depths, and some of the navigation basically was gone, and the option was to go back to Panama, which we could have been stuck there for like months on end because there was nothing coming in or out of Panama, or make the decision to travel across the Pacific without those
for 4 weeks.
For 4 weeks. That was a big. That
was probably the hardest part to accept.
To explain to Chantel that we can do that. It's not going to be the end of the world. At the end of the day, yes, it'd be great to have, but we can put our finger up and test it.
Captain Cook.
Yeah, pretty well. If he can do it, guess we're going to have to get back to basics.
Back to old schools. Oh my gosh.
So that was massive.
So wait, so what was the decision? Did you decide to go without it?
Oh, yeah. We're not going to wait another month in Panama in lockdown where you couldn't swim in the water hardly because there's crocodiles. You were going to be stuck on your boat, not being able to get off.
That's terrifying.
So go.
How do you know if you're going to get out after a month as well, right? You know, they might have extended it for another month and you've just sat there, the beard's growing, you're starting to look a bit Crusoe-y. It's
We're going to kill each other by the
There'll be movies about it.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So
the idea of going forward was the only
option.
Yeah.
This episode of Off Grid Traveller is proudly sponsored by Dry Flush Toilets Australia, home of the world-famous Lavio Dry Flush Toilet. This patented electric toilet has no chemicals, is not a composting system, and can be set up literally anywhere in under 60 seconds. It looks and feels like an at-home toilet to use, but it can be used anywhere with no external power or water, and it still flushes. There's also no cartridge to clean or empty, and it's perfect for camping, caravans, converted vans, boats, tiny homes, or anything off-grid. Go to www.dryflush.com.au and use coupon code OFFGRID to get a 10% discount on your toilet order today.
Yeah, and that comes down to the fact that you have faith in yourself and your family to be able to do it, and that comes down to the emotional side of, you, like we were saying before, you've been part of boating life for almost all your life, and what was it to tell Chantel and the family, hey, I've got this idea and I want you to get on board with me? How did you?
To go on
the whole journey. Yeah. That was definitely, obviously, that was the biggest
hurdle to go.
Well, no, it wasn't the biggest hurdle, but obviously it took a fair amount of effort to go, okay, like, the house we just built, let's just rent it out, where most people were saying, that's crazy, you've just built this house, which was lovely, but like, then we're just going to rent it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And take the kids out of school, obviously. And Chantel goes, well, if it doesn't work out, we can always come home. Well, to me, that wasn't an option. We go and there was a plan A, and plan A was always just do it. Chantel's plan was D.
I did we did discuss many plans.
I gave her the options, but none of the options were actually, in my mind, feasible, other than getting from A to B.
But they're there if you really, well, apart from COVID, which made it impossible to do plan B, C, D, E, because it was like all about flying around. It's good for me. It was good to know that I had other plans, even if I was never going to even action them. It's just the idea of knowing that there are other plans available to me, just in case, made me feel safe about getting on board onto plan A.
But we also went and did a course on safety at sea. Yes. We also did a first aid course with the kids, so they could understand what needs to be done and how to look after each other. So we did those things preparing for the trip.
Yeah. So it comes down to the fact that if you are doing this, you do a lot of prep work. Yes. Don't forget what your dream is and push to do it. But remember that the proper prior planning is always going to make your journey that much more enjoyable, because you're prepared, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
You're prepared, and you can. But the planning, it doesn't have to be a massive thing to do, because it could be overwhelming. If you start planning well in advance, you can plan at very small pace, so it doesn't feel like a big chunk of planning or work each time. It's little bits at the time, and within 2 years, we did little bits at the time.
But
really.
you have to choose a leave date, and you have to work towards that date. So you have to have a date, and you have to. And the commitment to us was, we put the deposit on the boat, and the boat was going to be finished in this date. That was the date we had to be there. So you know what? Everything else has to work towards that, no matter what it is. Even if you haven't done everything, you just have to.
I may have told my husband may have said, all right, the date will be a year before we actually made it, and say, okay, no, we make the date an extra year from now.
Yeah.
And then we'll have heaps more time to plan in a really nice and easy manner.
Yeah. So the fair balance between, hey, I want to do this now, but there's a date, and Chantel going, well, hold on, just give it another 365 days, and we can both meet in the middle. We'll make it happen, but you just have to make sure we're set up for this, and the kids are ready, and boom, Just it's our drive to continuously want to do stuff, Chantel. We're so sorry about that. It's just a mindset. It's a mindset we have.
But look, it's a good compromise. You set it, but you set the date in a reasonable manner. Not
so
5
both parties
years.
are happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not 5, not 10 years, but a year or 2 years. That was the difference.
And that's something I really want to point out to people who are thinking about traveling in general, is that putting a date in your calendar or booking that flight, that's maybe it's 6 months from now, maybe it's a year from now, and having that there, wow, yes. it will make you go.
Yeah, it makes you do everything else that you need to do to get to it, and it gives you, okay, then you can start writing checklists. What have I got to do? How do I tick these off? And how do I get through X amount to get to that point?
You work backwards from that date. What needs to happen for that?
Work with the end in mind, right? And if you've got that close off date, then you're there. And then afterwards, look, it's for a lot of people, going on a boat might be too big of an adventure initially, but if you're terrified of changing up your lifestyle, maybe go to another country for a month, and just see how you feel. 9 times out of 10, it's that first step which is the most terrifying, right? And then once you've done it, you're like, this is life. I am never going back to normal life if I can.
Yeah.
But can I just add to that? When we met, a lot of people we met on the journey on boats, when a lot of them were not educated on boat, had not been educated on boat. A lot of them, we met a French couple that literally each one of them took a crash course, for a big one for a week on sailing, and literally bought their boat and went with their daughter and crossed the Atlantic at the same time.
Just started doing it in chunks to start with around their area, and then they just moved.
Yes, so it's
practical.
Yes, I was lucky to have someone by my side that I knew I could trust with boats and sailing. So I know it was a big advantage. But honestly, we met so many people that had done some sailing there and there, but nothing major, and they still did it. They still the plunge. And for me, I actually put my hat off to those people, because I thought that was like the bravest thing they could ever.
Just to so they did short journeys, and then they grew it out into a point where they felt that they could go as long as their arm can take them, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
That screams a lot about what people can do and how we can adapt to different situations, and how easily we can adapt to just a city life if we let that become our home. And
absolutely, we can get in and we can procrastinate about the things that we want to do, but it's actually you've got to make a plan and start moving forward with life. You've only got a short period of life on this planet, and it goes so fast that you have to be able to unpack your life and realize that at some stage you won't be able to do those things. There's going to be a certain time frame when you're at a certain age that it just becomes too hard. The things you could do when you're 20 you can't do at 40 or 50, and the things you do at 50 and 60 you're not going to be able to do at 80. So if you're not now, you're going to miss it. You miss the opportunity. And the fact is the money will come and go, but the lifestyle of your life, like we took 24 months out to go traveling with the kids. Like, that's most people's life. They get 1 month a year. That's 24 years of holidays we just took.
We crammed
into 2 years.
That is a really good way of looking at it, and with that in mind, what's the next adventure?
Well, every day's an adventure, isn't it? Just with kids. But first things, we've sort of made a plan that we, when the kids have now left home, we will buy another boat and travel Asia. But this time we want to do it, and we want to take people on the journey that we then are able to share the ability for them to actually do what you're doing with this podcast is to teach them that they can do it. And it's not as hard as they think it is. And it's actually cheaper to go and travel the world than it is to stay home and pay for the cars and the house and the mortgages and all the rest of the things you do. It's actually crazy how much that costs versus going traveling.
Well,
So can you just say that one more time, please, so that people can get that dig into their mind?
It's actually cheaper when you put it in perspective. You take the kids out of the schools, you get rid of the cars and just have one car instead of two. You take the fuels and insurances and all the things it costs you to go to work, than what it is to actually go traveling. It's costing us $1,000 a week more to live here than it was to travel, which is madness. Which, when you think about it, you just like go, it just seems crazy.
It does.
But especially on the boat, you cannot pack too much when you go on the boat. There's not that much room, and you don't need. You realize.
Love that. Please, sorry, Chantel, continue. Absolutely.
Exactly. You don't need much, and we just go back down to what is it that we need: the food, the roof on our head, and even I love my clothes. I love shopping, but on the boat there was no point me bringing my high heels, because really I lived with my sandals or no shoes, and it was great for 24 months. I loved it.
Yeah, the boys had two pairs. They had a pair of thongs and a pair of shoes. When the shoes wore out, we got rid of them. They wore holes in them. We wrapped them in. No, we didn't wrap them in tape. we allowed them to get rid of those ones and put a new pair of shoes on. But that was it. There was no need to have 3 or 4 or 5 pairs of shoes.
We were not paying for the school or the activities after school, because the activities were, the ocean, swimming, discovering the world, and it was happening as we're going.
Yeah, it's funny because like right now I'm in South Korea, and this has been slowly turning into my little studio. But I've been traveling Asia for just under a decade, and the thing is, when you first go out there, you've got this big backpack that's probably got about everything under the sun, probably suits in there just in case. I've got the loafers, I've got all the stuff. By the end of it, I had probably this much, and you realize how all of this stuff here is nice to haves, right?
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, when you're on the open sea, or when you're out traveling, the less you've got, the less your back's gonna hurt.
Oh, absolutely. And the freer you are, the less you have, the freer you are. Like it's when you come back and you go, well, wait a minute, does the property own me, or do I own the property? I'm actually not too sure about that.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? And again, it really screams out why do we do the things we do? Is it because of the societal expectations? Is it because we have nice to haves and you just slowly build them up without realizing? There's so many things that open up your mind when you just go out on the sea, outside, into the jungle, anywhere, look up at the sky, see the stars, and go, yeah, this is all right. I could just do this for now.
Yeah, it's a lived experience instead of an existence.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good. If you go traveling every few years, at least if you let go of your property or what you own every few years, at least you declutter on a more regular basis.
That's right.
So you don't declutter a whole 10 years of your life. If you declutter every year or every 2 years, it's a lot smaller chunk and easier to do.
Yeah, I love, mate. You guys have been an absolute pleasure with how you've explained your journey, what you've been doing, and the fact that you're going to keep going and you're never going to stop doing this. And I'm going to put my hand up and say, when you're in Asia, I want to come on the catamaran or the yacht or the boat or whatever it is, even if it's a dinghy. I want you to teach me how to do the dinghying, because I bet that would be amazing.
Sound down, yes, sounds great.
Yeah, but the thing, one other thing I would say is that we've just now done a house swap with our house for a house in Sydney. The factor of things, I think, is moving away from what it used to be, where you had to own it, or you do own it, but you can swap it for somebody else's. So
for holiday swap, like we realized that really, if someone, my house is gonna be empty for a while, why not
just give it to somebody else and swap it with somebody else?
Swap it with somebody else. That is the place in the world that you want to visit and explore.
I'm sure many people would want to come to Australia and vice versa. You be able to go to Portugal, anywhere in Europe, America, and that's a really, really good tip. And on top of that as well, I'm sure that you could even do it with a little bit of creativity, swapping for a boat for a piece of time where they're on your house and stuff, right?
Yes,
absolutely. The possibilities become endless if you let go of that need to be, to have something. If that something
can be shared
and doesn't own you, as you said.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, guys, you also, I mentioned before, you have an Instagram, which is Sailing Saphira, and that's with 2 P's, so it's Saphira. And I would highly recommend anyone who is excited or interested in learning their story. It's got some really cool photos and videos, and there was that one, like you said, with your son doing the Circus Soleil around the catamaran in the middle of the water. It really opens your eyes to what freedom can be when you're not stuck in a house all the time, right?
Yes,
correct.
absolutely. Yes, it really shows.
Brilliant, guys. Well, do you have anything you'd like to share, or any last tips or tricks of the trade?
For me, I would just say, because I had a lot of fears throughout, getting there and throughout the whole ordeal, but I would say feel the fear and do it anyway. This is my motto, and this is probably one of the most important things that I remind myself each time I go on an adventure.
That's right. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. If you're feeling uncomfortable, that normally means growth is just about to happen.
And it is a good thing.
It is, yeah. Brilliant, guys. Well, this is the Off-Grid Traveler. We have had 2 really awesome guests here, Dean and Chantel. Thank you so much for your time. If anyone would like to ask some questions, yes, jump on and get them at Sailing Saphira. I'm sure they'll have some really cool things to talk about and tell you amazing adventures. Cheers, guys. Have an awesome one.
If you or someone you know would be an interesting guest on the show, we'd love to hear from you. We love speaking to everyday people who've taken to the open road or open seas for an extended period of time, or anyone that's set up their life in an off-grid location. Please email guest@offgridtraveller.com.au to get in touch. That's 2 L's in Traveller.